So in today's video, I'm going to show you how to paint these loose watercolor Plumeria flowers in Procreate. The process I covered today uses a lot of blending, and I think it's a lot of fun that you'll get a different flower each time. As usual, I'll list the brushes I'm using in the description, along with a download for the sketch and color palette. So as you can see here, I've already got the sketch and the color palette placed in here, and they're just set as the very top layers, and I've set the sketch to multiply, and then lowered the opacity just to make it less visible. Then to start painting, I'll make sure I'm on a blank layer down here below everything. And I'll start with this one here because I think it's the easiest one. So for the brush, I'm going to use the consistent quill, and I'll do a long press to grab color number 1, and I'm going to use this to fill out each petal separately, so I'll do my best to stay within the lines, and I'll try to paint each petal here in one continuous stroke. Now, it doesn't have to be perfect, but if you get a little bit too far away from the sketch, it's easy to fix that. Just go over to the liquefy tool, set to push, and you can just push it back in line with the sketch. Then you can go back to the brush and continue to the next petal. And once the main kind of base wash for the flower is filled in like this, we can move on and start adding in the other colors. So to do that, I like to use Alpha Lock. So here's the layer where I painted my flower. If I just tap on it, it brings up this menu, and I can enable Alpha Lock like this. And what this does is it just prevents me from painting in the white area, so everything that I do next is going to be limited to the flower. So for the brush, you could use anything, but I'm going to use the Shoto brush because it has a nice rough edge. And I'll start with the yellow. And basically, because Alpha Lock is on, as I said, we can't paint off into the white area. Everything is limited to the flower. So I'm going to lay down my yellow, focusing it mostly in the center of the flower, but I'm going to make sure that I don't have any areas where the yellow is like straddling the boundary between petals. I'm always going to make sure there's kind of some pink in the way, and this will make more sense later on. After that, I'll switch to my darker color here, the dark magenta, and I'm going to use this kind of randomly as well, but I'll focus it over on the ends of the flower petals. You can also use it in the center as well, but once again, make sure it doesn't straddle any of the boundaries between the petals. And then lastly here, I'd like the transition kind of in the center of the petals to be a little bit lighter. So I'm going to switch my color to pure white, increase my brush size, and just very lightly wash it on in those areas. And once all the secondary colors are laid on there like this, we can move on and do some blending. So for that, I like to switch off the sketch. And for the blending brush, I'll use the fluffy one at the bottom. And I just want to smooth the transitions, obviously, between these colors, but I want to pay special attention to where the petals are overlapping. So I spend a lot of time with the Shoto brush, kind of avoiding crossing the edge. So when we blend it, we have to consider that as well. So I'll just do my best to maintain contrast between the layered petals by making sure the colors don't bleed across that kind of line. And there we go, this blending looks pretty good. Now it's optional, but I recommend doing one more blending pass just to finish it up, but just basically going in a direction like this, just to give the petals more structure with the colors. Now it's not always necessary, but usually at this point I like to boost the contrast. So basically I want to boost these highlight areas and then sort of burn the edges a little bit just to make it more contrasty. So to do that, I'll start by using the freehand selection tool, and I'm just going to select the highlight areas. Then I'll feather out that selection quite a bit, maybe around 20%. Then I can go to my adjustments, curves, I'll make sure it's set to gamma, and I'm just going to raise this bottom node, and you can see it really brightens and softens those areas. Just be careful not to do it too much. There we go. After that, I'll do a similar thing, but this time I'll select the areas that I want to burn, just barely along those edges. Then I'll circle back, rejoin it, but this time I'll feather it out only around 10%. Curves, And instead of moving it up this time, I'm going to move it down and across. Again, it's an optional thing, but I think it just helps the colors look a little bit more nice. And at this point, with the colors pretty much finished, we can move on and add the rolled edges. So to do that, I'll start by making a blank layer above the flower, and I'll set the transparency mode to multiply. Then for the color, I'll grab number 4. And for the brush, I'm going to grab one of the glazing brushes. I'll use the water stain. And basically what I'm going to do is sort of start just away from the edge and then follow it down. And then when I reach the bottom, I'll just kind of curl it around, kind of like a sort of J shape like that. Then after that, I'll grab the water blender and I'll just blur the outer edge of this. And I'll repeat this process for each petal, making sure I only do it on the left side. And there we go. I think this looks pretty good, but I want to increase the contrast. So normally the back side of the flower is lighter. So when we see the curling edge, I think it makes sense if we kind of lighten this area a bit as well. So to do that, I'll make a blank layer, but I'm going to put it below the layer where we made those edges. For the color, I'll use pure white, fine liner pen, and I'll just carefully kind of draw this in the center of the flower, just in that kind of folded area. And then I'll fill it in a little ways up the petal, but not all the way to the tip. And of course, right away, this effect is way too strong. So to lighten it, I'll start by just lowering the opacity of that layer. There we go. And then the transition where I stopped partway up the petal, I like to blend that out using the water blender. And there we go. I think this flower is finished. Now there is one more step, basically the last step, which is adding the shading. Now for a flower like this, that's just kind of head on, there's no real shading necessary. But for the next flower, it's a little bit more complicated, and I'll use that as a way of demonstrating it. So for the second flower, I'll repeat the process and just fast forward through it. And finally, with this flower caught up, we can move on and I can show you how the shading works. So for the shading, I'll make it on a blank layer above all the other flower stuff. For the brush, I'll use the smooth dry round, and you could use any kind of saturated magenta tone. And what I'm going to do is just kind of paint this on in a couple areas where I want to boost the contrast and also where I think it might be a little bit darker, just because it's sort of enclosed in the petals. After that, I'll set the shadow layer to multiply, and then I'll adjust it just so they're barely visible. And then to finish it up, I'll use a water blender and just blur a few of the edges of the shadows just to kind of diffuse them a little bit in some areas. And since we're dealing with a pretty loose watercolor illustration, we can get away with a lot of mistakes, and it's okay if the shadows aren't perfect. And then lastly, as a finishing touch for this flower in particular, I recommend kind of darkening this area down here just to sort of differentiate it a little bit more. So for that, we first need to merge all the layers for that flower together onto one. Then I'll use the freehand selection tool. I'll just select the base like that. I'll feather it out. Then I'll darken it. Reduce the saturation just a little bit. And then I'll make another selection just at the very base here. I'll feather it out. And this time I'll mess with the hue, saturation, and brightness until I can make this into a subtle green tone. And just like that, these Plumeria flowers are finished. And here's the final result. I just printed it out on my Canon Pixma. I really enjoy the process for these flowers, especially the blending. And if you're looking for inspiration, you can look online and find all kinds of examples of these flowers. I was looking to buy some for my garden, and I saw like 40 different varieties with incredible colors. And that pretty much wraps it up. If you think I've earned it, please give this video a like, leave a comment letting me know that you made it to the end, and here are 2 more watercolor tutorials I think you'll love to watch next.